welcome everybody to this webinar. We can move on to the next slide. And thank you for your interest in our 2024 call for projects. Just to let you know what some of the goals are for today, we're going to be providing you with an overview of the Mitigation Action Facility and its priority sectors. We're going to be elaborating on the call for projects 2024. That's the core process, the timeline. We're going to be talking about the project concept phase. And we're going to help you shape your concept submissions. And the final thing that we would like to do today is to answer your questions and point to useful resources. There will be a dedicated Q&A section at the end. But if questions come up in the meantime throughout this webinar, feel free to post them in the chat. Try to precede any questions you have for later with the word question or a Q, and so on, and then we can just answer those, pick those up at the end if we can answer them. And who will be leading this webinar today? First of all, there's me. My name is Gurmeet Singh, and my colleagues Anesta and Dorian will also be joining and providing help during this webinar. We are a team based at the TSU, the Technical Support Unit of the Mitigation Action Facility, and we're based in Berlin. And essentially the technical support unit of the facility does all the background work, and we're going to be helping you master your applications, as I said. So what's the structure of this webinar today? We're going to provide you with a technical overview, and Dorian will be saying a few words just about this webinar and so on. There's going to be some words about the Mitigation Action Facility very briefly, and then we'll move on to some comments about the Call for Projects 2024. And number 4 is the meat of the webinar, as we discussed, mastering your applications, and we're going to be talking about some of the most common mistakes that we see in concept submissions and help you try to avoid those when you're submitting your concepts for the upcoming deadline, which is the 29th of February. And then, as I mentioned, there will be a Q&A at the end. And with that, I will pass over to my colleague, Dorian, who will provide a technical overview of the facility.
Thank you, Gurmeet, and hello, everyone. Before we dive into the contents of this webinar, I will first say a few words about the technical overview. On the top right of your control panel, you will see that your camera is off and that you are automatically muted. This will be your status during the whole meeting. You can post your questions in the chat. On the next slide, it explains how you can add live captions. You can add a live caption by clicking on More, then on Language and Speech, and then on Turn on the live caption. On the right side, click on the 3 dots to change the caption language. In this webinar presentation, there are several links to further sources of information. These will be available and working in the uploaded PDF, which we will publish together with the recording of the webinar. That was it for the technical overview. I will now continue with a brief introduction of the Mitigation Action Facility. So the Mitigation Action Facility is a grant-based multi-donor fund that drives sectoral decarbonization. The Mitigation Action Facility evolved from the NAMA facility in 2003 and provides technical support and climate finance for ambitious mitigation projects with the aim to decarbonize the key sectors of the economy and society. It funds climate change mitigation projects to implement national determined contributions and long-term strategies that are central to meeting the Paris Agreement's goals. On the right side of the slide, you can see some numbers about our current work and our current achievements. On the next slide, you can see our key sectors as highlighted in the IPCC's 6th assessment report. Energy, transport, and industry together account for more than 40 gigaton of CO2 emissions. And for this reason, the facility primarily focuses on the 3 priority sectors: energy, transport, and industry. However, the facility remains open to cross-sectoral projects that are linked to one of these priority sectors. The next slide summarizes the main aspects of the Mitigation Action Facility. The facility organizes annual calls for the implementation of ODA eligible countries that focus on the 3 priority sectors. The facility provides technical assistance and financial support. The project selection is competition-based. On the next slide, you can find an overview of the different phases of the Call for Projects 2024. We're now at the first stage, the submission of a project concept. The submission takes place via an open application platform. Keep in mind that the project concept has a slim structure. The information provided should be factual, consistent, and clear. You will have to elaborate on the information provided in more detail if you are invited to the outline phase. So this was the Mitigation Action Facility in a nutshell. I will now give the word back to Gurmeet.
Thank you, Dorian. That's a really nice overview of both the facility and some of our achievements there. Hopefully, if you have any questions, anybody who's participating in this webinar about the Call for Projects 2024, please just drop them in the chat. We do realize that there's it can be a little bit tricky to get your head around the difference between the concept, the outline, and what actually happens then. So we're really happy to answer any of your questions there. But I think we can actually already start moving on to the 5 most common mistakes in concept submissions. Very exciting. Should we move on to the next slide then, Valentina? Thank you. My colleague Valentina is controlling the slides in the background, so I'm saying the name Valentina every now and then. If you're wondering about that. So what are the 5 most common mistakes that we see in concept submissions? And they're just outlined here. The first is not knowing your project partners. Second is not knowing your project's target group. And the third is not outlining your proposed solution suitability. And fourth, of course, not outlining how your solution will be financed. And fifth, not showing how transformative your project is. And we're going to go through these mistakes one by one and what you can do to remedy them. And that should help you, as we promised, master your application. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is understanding the Mitigation Action Facility's philosophy. Now, this is really important, actually, because we see a lot of concept submissions which don't really have this as a kind of background understanding. And that, unfortunately, rules out some of the submissions that we see at an early stage. So the philosophy that we want to advocate for, that we want people to be able to understand, is we're really focused on transformational change. And as is written here, transformational change is a catalytic change in systems and behaviors resulting from disruptive climate actions that enable actors to shift to carbon neutral pathways. It's just a really fancy way of saying we want people to propose solutions which create changes in markets, in communities, which make it possible for different organizations or people to engage in behaviors which mitigate climate change, which reduce carbon emissions than the status quo. We actually want people and projects to submit ideas which are ambitious, right? And we don't necessarily want solutions which are just how do I say, which are doing things which already exist on the market, for example. You know, we've unfortunately had to rule out quite a few submissions for that reason. So really take your time to familiarize yourself with the facility's philosophy. And you can do that by looking into some of our documents here. There's the GID, the General Information document, the financial instruments, theory of change, and previous examples. And you can find all of those either here or on our website in the About section. But again, if you are struggling to find those documents in any way after this webinar, then please just let us know and we can provide you with that information later. So the 5 most common mistakes that we see in concept submissions. What did we say? The first was not knowing who your project partners are. So we're moving on to the next slide. So it's really important to understand who your project partners are. And what we want to get you in your project concept submission to be able to do is to mapping out your capacities. And if you can do this, you will be better able to outline who is going to help you implement your project. That means that what you want to be able to do is to show that you have a kind of unbroken chain of expertise for your project that can help you at all levels make sure that this project comes to fruition. So to help you do that, as we said, the best thing you can do is at this stage is to map out your capacities, which can lead to a successful collaboration. And so let's dive into some of the key steps there. So firstly, identifying and engaging with project partners is essential. So you should aim to map your capacities comprehensively, considering private and public sectors, academia and civil society. So this should ensure a well-rounded pool of expertise throughout the project's lifecycle. If you go through this mapping exercise and you identify any gaps in expertise along the way, that's something that you should start to remedy. And that the same goes for guaranteeing a robust financial mechanism. So aim to prioritize partners with financial expertise. So this step is really critical for the project's preparation and successful implementation. And so really try to map out who your project partners are, how they're going to help you implement your project throughout the project's life cycle. And moving on, that really will involve considering and evaluating the extent of the mandate held by sector-line ministries and national ministries responsible for environmental and climate change issues. You might find that some of the ministries don't actually have the mandate or don't have a sufficient mandate for your project to implement the change that you want to see. So you might have to identify additional political partners and that should be done if the mandate isn't sufficient. So once you've identified your potential partners, the next step is to contact them and just to ensure that they not only recognize but also support your project. That actually would also help you build recognition for your project and will help you throughout your project's life cycle to ensure its success, to make sure that you're building those networks for yourself. In the concept submission, you should try also to allocate specific tasks to each partner and really emphasize a collaborative approach. So this involves clear communication and coordination to make sure that you will be able to communicate with your project partners who's doing what so that everybody's on the same page. And by following these steps, by mapping your capacities, you can create a strong foundation for successful project partnerships and enhancing your collective capacity to address those environmental and climate challenges. We can take a second here just to pause before I move on, and perhaps you can add any questions to the chat if you have them before we move on. Okay, so If there were any questions, I think they should have been taken by now. And now we can move on and talk about the target group, and that's a common mistake that we see in the concept submissions. Let's differentiate between the target group and the project partner. And the project partner, as we mentioned, are those organizations which are going to help you implement your project. And the target group is who is this project, your solution, who is it aimed at? So we really want to be able to see in the concept submission very clearly who is your solution aimed at, right? And that's who the target group is. So you need to be able to identify all actors that will be relevant for the mitigation technology and practice promoted by the project. And this includes authorities at different levels of governance, private sector companies. Sorry, bear with me. I think we might be one slide too far ahead. Yes, I think this is where we need to be. Thank you, Valentina. So I'll just repeat that point. So you need to identify all actors that will be relevant for the mitigation technology or practice promoted by the project. And that can really help identify who is going to be the target group, who is your solution aimed at. So really try to think about all the authorities at different levels of governance. So that might be private sector companies, utilities, financial institutions, and informal sector actors. And a comprehensive approach will really help you ensure that you engage with all stakeholders who can contribute to the success of the project here. You might even want to do a mapping exercise here. That might actually also help you try to identify this target group. And yeah, an important consideration is just to check if all target groups are ready to participate in the project and just ensuring their acceptance of the proposed solutions is really, really key to smooth collaboration. Didn't understand the difference between the target group and project partner. And I just seen that question come in. So the project partner are those organizations that are going to help you implement the project. And the target group are those organizations that the mitigation solution is targeted at. So they're not helping you necessarily implement the project, but they will be affected by your solution. So moving on. So again, when you're identifying the project's target group, try to identify the key barriers that they're facing. So you should take a multifaceted approach here, consider economic, financial, structural, regulatory barriers. And this thorough analysis would really help you anticipate challenges and proactively address them. You can also additionally reflect on lessons learned from similar interventions. You can do that through the Mitigation Action Facility website. We have a robust library of resources that you can explore, and that includes looking at some of our monitoring and evaluation reports for lessons learned for similar projects and similar solutions in different countries. Or you can even look at some of the human interest stories that we have there. Feel free to explore the website and really try to make use of that to help you try to identify your target group. You can then not only draw insights from interventions from within your country, but also look at experiences from the broader region. And this broader perspective enriches your understanding and equips you to navigate challenges more effectively. So by following these steps in identifying your target group or target groups, you can create targeted and informed strategies to engage with them and overcome potential barriers. And that's something that we really want to be able to see in your concept submission. And again, I'll take a minute or so here, so you could put your questions in the chat if there is any need for that. Okay, I think that was a sufficient amount of time for any questions to come in, and we can move on to the next section. The next problem that we actually see, the next most common mistake, is not knowing how suitable the proposed solution is, and that's what we want to be able to help you overcome in your concept submission so that you can actually be supported by the facility. That would be really great. So are we on the right slide? Yes, we are. Cool. So let's assess the suitability of your proposed solution. And this step is really pivotal in ensuring that your efforts are not only effective, but also aligned with your local context and conducive to achieving wider transformational change. So cross-checking if the selected technology solution is suitable for the local context. What does that mean? This involves evaluating whether the chosen mitigation approach can be not only useful for the local context, but can it also be scaled up to achieve a broader impact? Your goal is not just mitigation, but mitigation at scale. So as I mentioned, in terms of our philosophy, what we're really looking for is fostering significant transformation. So try to think about how your solution can be replicated or how it can grow. Essentially, is this point. And then try to also focus on cost effectiveness and aim for the most cost-effective solution that delivers high greenhouse gas mitigation impact. This emphasis on decarbonization ensures that your resources are utilized efficiently to maximize the positive environmental outcomes. So as we say, we're really trying to have as much impact around the world, and we want to be able to fund as many projects as we can. So really try to think about the cost effectiveness of your solution there. And when it comes to technology, just ensure that the selected technology fits into the socio-economic geographical environment and aligns with political priorities. So it's a holistic approach, and it will help you ensure that your solutions are not only technically sound, but also socially and politically feasible. In essence, your commitment is to implement solutions that are not only effective in reducing emissions, but are also tailored to the unique characteristics and needs of your local context. I think we can move on to the next slide. And here I will pass over to my colleague, Anessa.
Thank you, Gurmeet, and hello, everyone. Thanks, Gurmeet, for such a comprehensive overview of project partners, target groups, and the technical scope of the solution. Of course, the next important question to answer is how will the proposed solution be financed? So going back to those top 5 mistakes that we defined there a few slides back, we would aim to answer that question of address that mistake of not outlining sufficiently how the solution will be supported financially throughout the project's implementation. So of course, to answer this underlying question, we would expect the concepts to present a potentially successful business model that needs to be defined for the specific case that's presented, considering the features and the needs of the end users and the investors that are relevant for your context, as well as including the adequate financing mechanism that could then support the proposed business model. I've already mentioned that it's important to consider the specific context in which you operate and kind of the features that you have that are relevant to your end user, investor, and even the target group. So this could include such factors to keep in mind, such as their major needs, vested interests, behaviors, economic conditions. That would all kind of influence whether the business case makes sense in the end of the day to your targeted group of investors or end users or not. So of course, in the presentation of the business model, we would like to see a discussion that would allow us to understand what are those factors that can influence this and how could they do that. Of course, it's the concept stage, so the information by default would be rather limited. We acknowledge that. However, as much as you can provide, the better it is. Likewise, we would be very happy to already see such figures as CapEx, OpEx, the returns that could be obtained through the implementation of the project solution on the one hand, and then on the other hand, compare this with the existing business as usual solutions and those figures that you can already observe in the market currently. So if you have this level of detail available, of course, you're very welcome to add it to your concept submission. If precise details are not there, still it would be great if you could discuss this to the extent possible so we could really form an impression on these key parameters behind the business model of the solution that you're proposing. Third point that we would like to emphasize here is that as part of the business model, we would also like to understand what type of incentives are required to make this business model more competitive. And often we see that such things as financial, fiscal, regulatory measures are needed to support the proposed business case. So they may already exist, but perhaps are not implemented fully, or there are certain barriers associated to that. Or perhaps they would be needed to be introduced as part of the project intervention. So this aspect should also feature in the business model introduction for your concept. Overall, you see this question on the slide. We really encourage you to think, okay, is my business model clearly defined and plausible for the solution that the project is trying to implement? And of course, ideally, that answer should be yes at the concept stage as well. So these would be the key 3 points that we'd like to highlight now for the business model. We could go ahead to the next slide, and likewise there we have the second part of this topic, which is the financing mechanisms. And here the business models, of course, often need to be supported in certain ways to make them more feasible. So we need to have an understanding what is the way in which this could be done in the most feasible way for your specific context. So of course, to again, kind of working with this question, how will the solution be financed? We would encourage you to map out the financial mechanisms that you are considering and investigate their ability to address the barriers that have been identified earlier when Gurmeet was talking about the target group. So as you can see, everything's closely linked. Both the business model and the financing mechanism need to be linked to your kind of target group and the scope of the intervention, and ideally they should address those key barriers that you identify as part of the earlier steps in the process. Important also to emphasize that the financial mechanism should address those barriers in a way that would support long-term change. So that's also something to consider when you're mapping them out and investigating, okay, which option would maybe be the most suitable here. The financial financing mechanisms often consists of multiple financial tools, instruments that could be used. Of course, a mix of instruments is welcome to be presented in the concept. However, we need to have an understanding, and that means some reasoning needs to be presented on why your suggested mix of the financial tools is, so to say, most suited to address those barriers and fulfill the purpose that's foreseen as part of the project idea. Ideally, we would also like to see a discussion on why the existing alternatives on the markets of the existing financial tools are not sufficient to do the job. So what is the gap there that would be then addressed by the intervention of your project and by the proposed mix of financial tools? So this would be something that we would highly appreciate as part of your concept submission. Last point in the slide, but definitely not least, is that the proposed financial mechanism should, of course, be designed in a way to leverage public and private investments in the project solution. So please have this lens on your on the process when you're defining the financing mechanisms. And ideally, we would also like to see the discussion on the amounts, let's say, that could be leveraged by the project intervention already in the concept. We understand that in some cases, those you cannot, of course, provide precise amounts. However, again, the more detail you can submit, the better. And at the very least, we should see the potential and see the logic on how one or the other mechanism is designed in a way to then pull those funds from the public and private domain. So overall, the question, the control question that you could be asking when working with these topics would be, is my financial mechanism designed to sustain change? As I mentioned before, really rather the focus on the long-term change and address those key barriers over long-term, in contrast to offering one-off intervention. So this could be something really to keep at the back of your mind when you're finalizing your concepts this month. So this input would kind of summarize the that common mistake that was identified for not outlining the approach to financing the solution. And with that, we can go to the final component here, which would hopefully help you to address the fifth common mistake of not discussing sufficiently the transformative potential of the suggested, of the proposed project. So, of course, as Gurmeet already mentioned in his part, and I have emphasized now under the financial mechanisms, what you could see for the Mitigation Action Facility, if you also go back to our transformational change definition, is that we really would like to see long-term impact that goes beyond just the immediate project intervention. And to do this, we would encourage you to think about and then reflect those considerations in your concept that would concern, first of all, ways in which the project can spark systemic change as part of its intervention. So this could include such aspects as promoting new market behavior, regulatory changes, new economic incentives, all of that aimed at securing long-term political support and private sector buy-in. So that's very important to consider as part of your concept submission. Gurmeet already alluded to that when he was talking about larger scale greenhouse gas mitigation potential. So another component of transformative change would be that replication and scale up potential. So in your concept, we would expect to see at least preliminary considerations of the possibility to transfer your project approach to other contexts. This could be regional context, national context, could be other sector. So whatever is most suitable for your particular scope, we would need to see what additional ripple effects we could achieve through the project's intervention. So that's definitely something that yeah, we would ask you to, again, keep in mind when compiling your concept ideas. And the last point here would be that, of course, the overall aim is that for projects to significantly and permanently reverse the flow of funds towards a carbon neutral pathway. So what this means is that essentially we want to see a strong enough impact of the project, or at least potential for impact in your concept, that would allow us to achieve the impact, work towards the impact of the overall mitigation action facility. But of course, through the systemic change, replication and scale up, the projects should aim to really promote decarbonization on a wider, let's say, scale than, as I've mentioned before, than just its immediate kind of intervention boundary. So I think that would be all for the 5th point. This is quite a lot of information, but as it's mentioned already in the chat, the slides will be available. There's also links to this slide that you can explore, to the slide deck that you can explore at your own pace later. And one of those links has the concept on transformational change, which is our definition of it, with a little bit more details on things to consider simply. So I would encourage you to look into that if you would like to learn more. But just remembering these 3 points and the overarching question should help you already. So yeah, with that, I will then pass it back to you, Gurmeet, to take us to the next stage.
Thanks, Anesta. Yeah, it's important to remember these 3 points and the 300 other points that we've mentioned in this this presentation. As Anesta said, we realize it's a lot of information, but the slides will be available on the website. And at the end of this presentation, we'll point to some further resources that you can already start looking for. If you want to answer some of these questions that you might have. And speaking of questions, we can now move on to the question and answer section of the webinar. So perhaps we can get there. And I think the first question, I will moderate the questions which are coming in, and then I will pass them over either to my colleague Anesta or Alexandra. And okay, so the first question we have here is, under main project partners, is it important to include specific project partners, or can it be generic, i.e. local NGOs in the target areas? And
yes.
Alexandra.
Thank you, Gurmeet, and hello from my side too. I'm happy to take this question because we get this question quite often. As we already explained in this presentation, experience has shown that the very early involvement of project partners is of great importance. So it ensures the support, but also commitment of the partner, and it can help to adapt the project design and align it with their experience and capacities. So keeping this in mind, I would say if these partners are already defined in your concept, this of course demonstrates a certain level of readiness. In case your partner is not yet fixed, it is also possible to share at least an initial idea. Yeah.
Thanks, Alexandra. Yeah. So quickly moving on to the next question. Do you have any fact sheets or overall guidance on what is expected to detail out on the business case or the business model? And who would like to take that one?
Perhaps I could take it, as it relates pretty nicely to the input I provided. Of course, we have more guidance on the website with regards to the financing mechanisms and the business models themselves. So those links will be included in these slides, just as the transformational change one. So I encourage you to take the time and go through the material once the webinar is concluded. And as mentioned, as the step 0 to get to know the facility before starting to work through those 5 points. At the same time, as I've mentioned, ideally, if you already have those numbers on potential CapEx, OpEx revenues, that would be great. If not, perhaps some more qualitative considerations exist that could be included in the concept. So I think the more the detail, the better, as this would then reinforce that readiness aspect that Alexandra mentioned from a different perspective. But yeah, that's another component, I guess, of the readiness criterion that we look into. Yeah, so I think I would stop there. And of course, we're not able to provide very specific guidance as part of these answers, because each context is different. So I would also like to mention that yeah, we can give out this higher level input here, and I hope that you find it useful. And of course, you should adapt it to your specific case.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as we mentioned, and as we're going to keep referring to, the documents are available on the website that should help you in filling out some of the answers that you to questions that you may have regarding your own local context. But if there is something very pressing that you simply can't find the information to, then you can always get in contact with us on our general email, which will be shown at the end of the webinar too. Okay, so next question. As there will be several submissions from our organization, up to the maximum of 10, I would like to request clarification on whether these concepts should be submitted centrally through one contact person for the organization, or whether country/regional units can submit them on behalf of the organization, I guess decentrally. And that's been asked by UN OPS.
And also in the chat, so happy to take it. So quick answer would be yes, decentralized submissions are acceptable, but it's important to keep in mind that these concepts that would be submitted by the several sub-organizations would still count towards this one framework organization. So it's advised to keep in mind or keep an overview of all of these submissions that were made, and then ensure that it's not more than 10, because 10 is, we accept 10 concepts per organization under this Call for Projects 2024. I also saw a question with regard to the registration in the open application platform. So here again, it's of course totally fine to have several accounts reflecting these different, for example, offices that your organization has in the different countries. But then here again, it's really important that you keep an overview and that you monitor the maximum number of submissions per your organization.
Great, thank you, Alexandra. I think we have time for a few more. I've seen another long one, so I guess I'll pass this over to whichever one of you would like to answer it. We are developing a single project that would incorporate several ministries in different countries in the Caribbean. Is this kind of project accepted? All of the countries are eligible based on the DAC list. And that's to either Alexandra or Anesta.
Well, Alexandra took the last one, so let me try this one. So what we know from the question is that all countries are eligible. So it would seem yes. So in other words, the cross-border or regional projects are acceptable to be submitted as part of the concept stage. However, we would like to draw your attention to the fact that if this then concept would go ahead to the outline stage, so the next stage that my colleague Dorian showed in the introduction, we would need to have support letters from all those different parties involved, so all the different countries that would be concerned. The ministries representing those countries would need to document their support to the project. So that coordination effort is something you should probably consider already at the concept stage, whether it can really materialize and that support could be also proven. So just keep this in mind. However, in general, as I've mentioned, cross-border regional projects are, you're welcome to submit them. Especially we see, for example, in the SITS context, that could be something that could be applicable to you. Just as an example, it doesn't have to be SITS context. So yeah. I think that would be the answer we could provide.
If I may, I would maybe add one sentence because we received a lot of questions with regard to the level of commitment and how this could be proven at concept phase. So in this case, just as a reminder, the concepts are without any annexes when you are at concept stage. This will change in the outline stage. Then we will request several annexes and also written endorsement letters by the ministries. So to prove that you have already commitment by your political partners, for example, I would say the clear indication that you know who's the partner and the integration into your overall design of the concept and the project would prove that the ministry is on board. But there is no need to have already a signed commitment letter, signed agreement, or anything else like this. This is due for the outline phase. Yes, sorry for jumping in, but I thought it would fit well to give an answer here too.
That's most welcome, Alexandra, and thank you, Anesta, for your detailed answer too. I think we have time for one final question. I guess either Alexandra or Anesta can choose to take it, and that is, what is the criteria of selection for the selected projects?
Yes, maybe let me take this. We have, so first remark would be that we have the general information document, which is quite long, but still it outlines all of these selection criteria that we have also for the concept phase. So to remind you all, it's about ambition and feasibility. So the facility first checks the overall eligibility of the country and the submission. This is then with regard to the OAD DAC eligibility, but also is it a timely submission? Is your project part of, or would it be implemented in one of the priority sectors? And if this is fulfilled, then several selection criteria would be take a look at. This is, for example, catalytic effect, mitigation potential. But without going into details, please take a look at the general information document. It's outlined there. Yes.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. And I think with that, we'll have to close the Q&A. I think we have a lot more questions in our chat that we haven't been able to answer today. But I think my colleagues and I will discuss how best we're able to address them. Perhaps we can take some of the more common ones and either put them on the website if they're not already there, or we can try to answer them in a quick newsletter or something, which we can organize over the next days, definitely before the deadline. If there is a need for that, perhaps some of the questions there can already be answered, as Alexandra suggested, in the general information document. So if we're not already on that slide, we can move over to that one there. And the general information document is available on the website, and it's available in English, Spanish, French. This will cover most, if not all, of your questions that you should have regarding your application, regarding your project. It's extremely detailed, as Alexandra mentioned, but really take the time to look through it. It will really help you mastering your application, which was the initial aim of this webinar. And there are also a range of other resources which we've put on our website for you. And these include, for example, further FAQs on the call for projects, the fact sheet on the financial mechanisms under the Mitigation Action Facility. And as I mentioned, I'm not entirely sure if it's on this list here, but really go through the website, try to look at some of the monitoring, evaluation, learning exercises that have gone on from current and previous projects from the facility to extract some of those lessons that would help you shape your project. As we mentioned, the slides of this webinar themselves will be put on the website as soon as possible. So if you need to refer to any of these documents or any of the information presented in this webinar, you'll be able to do that. So what's next? As I mentioned, the recording and presentation will be on our website. On the 14th of February, we'll be publishing the clarification notes, the second round of clarification notes. So for all questions received until the 11th on our general email or either in this chat, we will be publishing those notes on in those notes there. There's also the dedicated webpage for the call for projects that you can navigate to. Our general email that you can contact if you have any further information requests for any reason that you would like to get in contact with us, please do so. We'd really like to hear from you. And that's contact@mitigation-action.org. And of course, I, as the comms manager of the Mitigation Action Facility, urge you to sign up to our newsletter so you can stay up to date on all developments here. And so that you'll be able to find information not only about the Call for Projects 2024, but any other Call for Projects we'll be having in the future. Please remember that the deadline for submitting project concepts under the Call for Projects 2024 is the 29th of February 2024, 3 p.m. Central European Time. And it's the 29th of February, of course, because it's a leap year. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for your participation in this webinar. We hope that we've been able to answer some of the more pressing questions that you have and to help you sort of really master your application to make sure that it's as strong as possible when you send it in to us. The deadline again is the 29th of February 2024, 3 p.m. Central European Time. Thank you on behalf of everybody here at the Mitigation Action Facility and look forward to hearing from you in the future. So, thank you so much.